In a bold social experiment, billionaire Elon Musk disguises himself as a homeless person to see how a top Beverly Hills bank treats someone who appears to be in need. But before we reveal the surprising twist, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. And please tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. The afternoon sun beat down on Mayor Illy on the streets of Beverly Hills, casting a golden glow over the palm-lined avenues are a city known for its glamour. The wealthy flaunt their affluence with ease, and luxury is a way of life among the Bentleys and Lamborghinis parked along the pristine sidewalks. A man in tattered clothing ambled down the street, drawing curious glances from passers-by. His shoes were scuffed, his pants frayed at the edges, and his shirt hung loosely on his wiry frame. Despite his disheveled appearance, he had a peculiar confidence in his stride, as though the world around him held no power to intimidate him. Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest men in the world, had carefully orchestrated his appearance to ensure he blended in. Today, he wanted to see life through the eyes of someone often overlooked by society. His eyes were disconcerting, his beard patchy, his baseball cap faded, and his clothes looked like they'd seen better days. For decades, his greatest weapon was his ability to suppress the commanding aura that usually surrounded him. To the world, he was just another nobody. The grand facade of First Summit Bank loomed ahead, its gleaming glass doors reflecting the brilliance of the sun. Musk hesitated briefly before stepping inside, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and curiosity. The opulence of the bank's interior was almost overwhelming. The floor was a sea of polished marble, while the vaulted ceilings bore intricate designs that seemed to. The atmosphere echoed the wealth of the institution. Customers sat in plush leather chairs, sipping complimentary coffee, while sharply dressed bankers attended to their every need. When Musk entered, the atmosphere subtly shifted. Conversations faltered, eyes darted his way, and a few patrons exchanged whispers. He felt the weight of their judgment, their unspoken assumptions about his worth, or lack thereof. Yet he remained unfazed, his focus sharp as he approached the reception desk. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged woman with he had a receding hairline and an icy demeanor. His name tag read Marilyn. She barely concealed her disdain as she took in Musk's appearance. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her tone was flat and devoid of warmth. "Yes," Musk replied calmly. His voice was steady despite the stares boring into his back. "I'd like to open a basic checking account." Marilyn blinked, clearly taken aback by the request. She quickly masked her surprise with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Our minimum deposit for opening an account is $500, she said, enunciating each word as though speaking to a child. "Do you have the necessary funds with you today?" Musk reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "You might want to try a different institution that's better suited to your circumstances." The rejection stung, not because of the words themselves, but because of how easily they were delivered. Musk glanced around the room, noting the smirks and whispers from other staff and customers. He felt an unfamiliar pang of vulnerability, a glimpse into the reality faced by countless others who lack the privileges he often takes for granted. Marilyn gestured for a security guard, and Musk noticed a young woman sitting at a nearby desk. She couldn't have been older than her mid-20s, and unlike the others, her expression wasn't one of disdain. Instead, her eyes held a mixture of curiosity and discomfort, as though she were grappling with an internal debate. Musk filed her face away in his memory before the guard's firm voice interrupted his thoughts. There was a young woman sitting at a nearby desk. She couldn't have been older than her mid-20s. Unlike the others, her expression wasn't one of disdain. Her eyes held a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. It was as though she were grappling with an internal debate. Musk filed her face away in his memory. Before he could think any more about her, the guard spoke up. "Sir, if you don't have the required funds, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." There was no room for argument, so Musk nodded silently. His mind was racing. He had come here to test the boundaries of perception and humanity. The results were predictable, but no less disheartening. As he turned to leave, he cast one last glance at the young woman. For a brief moment, their eyes met. In that fleeting exchange, he saw something different. Something he couldn't quite place. Outside, the sun was still blazing. But Musk's thoughts were stormy. The world he had created was. It seemed like the harsh realities faced by those without power or privilege were far removed from the world he had created. His experiment had just begun, and it was already revealing more than he had anticipated. Inside the opulent First Summit Bank, the atmosphere buzzed with a quiet arrogance. Staff members moved with the quiet arrogance of people who catered exclusively to the elite. Their tailored suits and designer shoes were an extension of the bank's brand. Marilyn, the receptionist, had already dismissed Elon Musk. He lingered near the desk, undeterred, clutching his crumpled $20 bill. He took a deep breath and stepped forward again, clutching his crumpled $20 bill. He turned and stepped away. "I'd like to open a basic checking account," he repeated, his voice calm but firm. Musk's unassuming demeanor, coupled with his shabby appearance, seemed almost out of place against the backdrop of wealth and privilege. Marilyn looked up from her computer. Her perfectly manicured nails clicked impatiently on the counter as she sighed. He had a manicure, and his nails clicked impatiently on the counter as he sighed. "As I mentioned before," she said, her tone clipped. "Our minimum deposit is $500. We don't offer services below that amount." Her words were laced with the kind of subtle derision reserved for those deemed unworthy of her time. Musk reached into his pocket and produced the $20 bill again. He smoothed it out on the counter. The faded currency starkly contrasted with the gleaming surface beneath. "This is all I have for now," he said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "But it's enough to get started, isn't it?" Marilyn's lips curled into a tight smile, but her eyes remained expressionless. "Sir, we have policies," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you'd be better off at a credit union or a community bank first. Summit caters to a different clientele," and heads turned subtly in his direction. In the direction of the reception desk, a few patrons exchanged amused glances. They whispered just loud enough for him to hear. One muttered, "The audacity," while another chuckled under his breath. Despite the humiliation, Musk remained calm. He scanned the room. His eyes briefly locked on the young trainee he had noticed earlier. She was seated a few desks away. Her head was bent over some paperwork. However, her frequent glances toward the reception desk didn't escape his notice. Unlike the others, her expression wasn't smug or dismissive. If anything, she looked uneasy. "Policies aside," Musk said, turning back to Marilyn, "this isn't about banking. It's about helping people manage their money, no matter how much or how little they have." Marilyn scoffed, leaning closer to lower her voice. "This is Beverly Hills, sir," she said, her tone old. "We are not a charity." She pressed a button on her desk, summoning a security guard who quickly approached. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't do business that meets the bank's policies." His voice was firm but not hostile. It was like he was just doing another routine eviction. Musk hesitated. He tightened his grip on the $20 bill. He'd come here to test more than the bank's policies. He'd come to test their humanity. But the walls of privilege were proving harder to penetrate than he'd expected. Reluctantly, he nodded and stepped away from the counter. He didn't look back, but he threw one last glance toward the young woman. Clara seemed to be having an internal conflict. Her colleagues carried on with their tasks, seemingly unaware of the silent struggle playing out on her face as Musk turned to leave. Clara's eyes met his, and there was something in them, perhaps an apology or a flicker of defiance. The sun was blinding, but Musk barely noticed. His mind was racing, replaying the interaction over and over. The staff treated him exactly as he'd anticipated, with scorn and dismissal, but Clara was different. She hadn't spoken a word yet, but her expression had conveyed more empathy than anyone else in the building. Seated on a bench near the bank's entrance, Musk watched as customers came and went. They were all dressed to the nines, a sharp contrast to his disheveled disguise. He thought of Clara again, wondering what kind of person she was and whether she might be bold enough to defy the rigid culture of the institution she worked for. Back inside, Clara sat at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she filed paperwork. She couldn't shake the image of the man at the counter. He had seemed so calm, so dignified, even in the face of rejection. While Marilyn and the others had laughed him off, Clara couldn't help but feel that they had made a terrible mistake. Well, for the rest of the day, her mind was plagued with questions. Why did he want an account here? What brought him to a place where appearances mattered more than people? Most importantly, why hadn't she done more to help as the clock struck 5 and the bank was preparing to close? Clara made a decision. Tomorrow she would find a way to help that man, even if it meant risking her job. The next morning, Elon Musk returned to the park bench outside the bank. He sat quietly, observing the bustling activity around him. He had no immediate plans to re-enter the building. Yesterday's humiliation was still fresh in his mind, but he was curious about the young woman, Clara, had kept him nearby. Something about her brief glances and the discomfort etched on her face had left an impression. Unlike her colleagues, she had shown traces of humanity. Musk couldn't help but wonder if she might be the anomaly he was searching for. Before describing the machine's abilities, I'll add a list of their experiences with proficiency inside the bank. Clara was restless. The day had barely begun, and yet the tension from yesterday lingered as she organized files. At her desk, she overheard Marilyn recounting the previous day's events to another staff member. "Can you believe that guy?" Marilyn sneered, shaking her head. "He really thought he could just walk in here and open an account with $20. Her colleague laughed and added, "I'm surprised he didn't try to be with Pocket Lint." Clara bit her lip, forcing herself to stay silent. Their ridicule grated on her, not just because it was cruel, but because it starkly contrasted with the values she'd been taught growing up were to treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. Yesterday's encounter had only reinforced that belief, but she hadn't done anything to act on it. The morning passed slowly, with the usual parade of wealthy clients streaming through the bank. Clara struggled to focus on her tasks, her thoughts repeatedly drifting to the man in ragged clothes. She couldn't ignore the nagging sense of guilt that weighed on her. It wasn't just his treatment that bothered her. Was it her own fault for not doing anything during her lunch break? Clara stepped outside to clear her head. The fresh air was a welcome change from the stuffy atmosphere of the bank. She wandered toward the park, her gaze scanning the area almost unconsciously. When her eyes landed on the same disheveled figure from the day before, her heart skipped a beat. Musk was seated on the bench, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert as he watched the world go by. Clara hesitated, unsure whether she should approach him. She looked back at the bank, the imposing building a stark reminder of the rules she was supposed to follow. But something inside her urged her forward. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the bench, her footsteps hesitant but deliberate. "Excuse me," she said softly, stopping a few feet away. Musk looked up, his expression neutral but curious. Clara fidgeted with the edge of her blazer, her nerves getting the better of her. "I just wanted to apologize for what happened yesterday," she said finally. Musk studied her for a moment, taking in her sincerity. "You work there, don't you?" he asked, nodding toward the bank. Clara admitted, her cheeks flushing, that she was just a trainee and didn't have much say in how things were run. Musk's lips curved into a faint smile. "You came out here anyway," he said. Clara shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. She was unsure how to respond. "I just wanted to tell you that not everyone there thinks the way they do. I don't know if it matters, but I think everyone deserves a chance, no matter what their situation looks like." "It matters," Musk said quietly, his tone thoughtful. He gestured to the empty spot on the bench beside him. "Why don't you sit down for a minute, Clara?" She hesitated, but eventually took a seat. Her nerves gradually eased. "Why do you work there?" he asked, his voice casual. Clara blinked, surprised by the question. "I've always wanted to work in finance," she explained. "I thought it would be a way to help people make a difference, but it's not exactly what I expected." Musk chuckled softly. "No, it rarely is," he said. Clara glanced at him, her curiosity growing. "If you don't mind me asking," she said tentatively, "why did you come to our bank? There are plenty of places where you might have. You've been treated better." Musk leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes the best way to see people's true colors is to strip away the expectations," he said cryptically. Clara frowned, confused by his words, but before she could press further, he stood up. "Thank you," he said, his tone warm. He had seen her. Clara spent the night grappling with her decision. Her mind raced with the potential consequences of going against the bank's policies. Losing her job was a real possibility, but she couldn't. She shook off the image of the man's calm yet vulnerable demeanor. Something told her he wasn't who he seemed, and she resolved to act on her instincts the following morning. Clara arrived at the bank with a renewed sense of purpose. She kept an eye on the front entrance, hoping the man would return. Her pulse quickened when she spotted him near the park bench across the street, seated with the same quiet composure as before. During her lunch break, Clara grabbed her bag and hurried outside. Her heart pounded as she crossed the street, and the man looked up. His piercing eyes met hers and he smiled faintly. Clara hesitated, then sat down beside him. She wanted to apologize again for what had happened. It wasn't fair, and she didn't think he deserved to be treated like that. Musk tilted his head and studied her carefully. He said, "Why do you, Clara?" Clara bit her lip. "I carefully explained that I joined the bank to help people, but lately it feels like I'm just helping the people who already have everything. Yesterday reminded me why I wanted to be here in the first place." Musk nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "So what do you plan to do about it?" Clara took a deep breath. I want to help you open an account. It might not be much, but it's a start. Back inside the bank, Clara approached her desk with a sense of determination. She logged into the system, glancing around to make sure she wasn't going to get noticed. Musk followed her inside. He was quiet but observant, and the other staff members barely acknowledged him, dismissing him as irrelevant. I can open a basic checking account for you, she said in a low voice. Normally, we require a minimum deposit of $500, but I can waive that for now using my employee privileges. Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You're willing to risk this for someone like me, Clara nodded. She said firmly, everyone deserves a chance. Besides, she thought, you're not just someone like me. There's something different about you. He chuckled softly, but his eyes betrayed a hint of surprise. You don't even know me, he said. No, I don't, Clara admitted, but I can tell you're not what you seem. Clara navigated the system, and Marilyn's voice cut through the air. Clara, who's that? At her desk, she called, her tone sharp. Clara froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, just helping a new client. She replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. Marilyn's eyes narrowed as she approached a new client. She repeated her gaze, landing on Musk. Haven't we already dealt with him? She said. I'm handling it, Clara replied, meeting Marilyn's stare. Marilyn hesitated, clearly suspicious, but eventually shrugged and walked away. Clara exhaled, relieved but still on edge. She quickly completed the process. She handed him a receipt for his new account. You're officially a client, she said, sounding triumphant. Musk looked at the receipt in his hand, then back at Clara. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly, but you did it. It's the right thing to do, Clara replied simply. For a moment, Musk said nothing. His expression was unreadable. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it on the desk. Thank you, Clara said, standing. He said he'd see her again soon, before leaving the bank. Clara stared after him, unfolding the paper and reading the words. Your actions today won't be forgotten. She slipped the note into her pocket, wondering what Musk's cryptic message meant. She'd taken a big risk, but the look in his eyes as he left reassured her that she'd made the right choice. She knew she'd made the right choice. Her small act of defiance had set something extraordinary in motion. Musk's quiet departure wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. The following morning, Clara arrived at the bank with a lingering sense of unease. Yesterday's bold decisions still weighed on her mind. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed the irregularities in the system. As a trainee, she was painfully aware of how precarious her position was. She knew her position was precarious, and she couldn't shake the memory of the man's words. Your actions today won't be forgotten. What did he mean? Was it a simple thank you, or was there something more to his cryptic message? Clara was certain she hadn't seen the last of him. That afternoon, she was helping a wealthy client at the bank when the man from the day before walked in. The doors opened, and the man from yesterday walked in. This time there was something different about him. He still wore his ragged clothes, but he moved with a quiet confidence that seemed out of place against his appearance. Clara's heart skipped a beat when their eyes met, but she quickly masked her reaction. Marilyn, however, wasn't so restrained. She straightened up immediately, her face tightening with irritation. Marilyn blinked, momentarily stunned. Clara, watching from her desk, felt a flicker of satisfaction. Musk stepped up to the counter and pulled a neatly folded stack of bills from his pocket. He slid it across the counter without a word. Marilyn, still flustered, began counting the money. $200, she muttered, her tone clearly indicating that she was not happy about it. She glanced at Clara's desk, where she had handled Musk's account the day before. It looks like your account is already set up, sir. I'll process this deposit. Thanks, Musk said with a faint smile. His tone was polite but firm. He turned and walked toward Clara, who was still seated at her desk. Her pulse quickened. You didn't expect me to come back so soon, did you? Musk said as he approached her. Clara shook her head, unable to hide her surprise. I wasn't sure I'd see you again, she admitted. He sat down opposite her desk and lowered his voice so that only she could hear. He told her that what he'd said the day before was true. He said that her kindness hadn't gone unnoticed, and that most people wouldn't have done what she'd done. Clara flushed slightly and was unsure how to respond. She said that she'd just done what she thought was right, and that's exactly why it mattered. Musk replied that she'd taken a risk. She didn't know who he was or what he could do, but she'd acted on principle. That's pretty rare, Clara thought, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. Who are you really? She asked. Musk's expression shifted, his eyes glinting with something that looked like amusement. Let's just say I'm someone who believes in testing the system, he said cryptically before Clara could press further. You've already done more for me than most people would, but if you're willing to take another chance, he added. Clara was interested in helping him again, but she was also cautious. What kind of help did he need? Musk leaned in slightly and whispered, Meet me at the park after your shift. He wanted to show her something. Clara's day passed in a blur. She found it difficult to concentrate on her work. Her thoughts were consumed by the enigmatic man and his unexpected return. What did he want to show her and why? Did he choose her, of all people? As the clock neared 5, Clara debated whether she should go and meet him outside of work. It felt risky, but her curiosity was too strong to ignore. By the time her shift ended, she had made up her mind. She left the bank and walked towards the park. The evening sun cast long shadows across the street. Musk was waiting for her, seated on the same bench where they had spoken before. This time, he greeted her with a smile that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken plans. Thanks for coming, he said, standing as she approached. I'm not sure I should be here, Clara admitted, glancing around nervously. You're not doing anything wrong, Musk assured her. I just want to give you a glimpse of what happens when people like you make bold choices. Clara raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. What does that mean? Musk gestured for her to follow him. Walk with me, he said. It's time you saw the bigger picture. As they strolled through the park, Clara felt that whatever came next would change everything she thought she knew, not just about him but about herself too. The park was quiet, with just the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird filling the silence between her and Musk as they walked. Her curiosity was simmering beneath the surface, but she held her questions until he spoke. He seemed to be contemplating his words, his usual air of mystery now tinged with. At last, Musk broke the silence. Clara, have you ever thought about why people are so quick to judge others based on appearances? She nodded, thinking back to the near whispers she'd witnessed at the bank. I've never been able to ignore it, but I don't know how to change it. He said, That's why I went to your bank. I wanted to see how people react when they think someone has nothing to offer. Clara frowned, her confusion deepening. You're testing the system, she asked, trying to piece together his motives. Huh. Musk smiled faintly. I've spent most of my life building systems that shape industries, economies, even the way people think about the future. But the problem with systems is that they often forget the people. They're meant to serve. Clara was struck by the weight of his words. So, what are you trying to prove? I'm not here to prove anything, Musk said. I'm here to find people who still believe in doing the right thing, even when it's not easy. They continued walking until they reached a sleek black car parked discreetly near the edge of the park. Musk gestured toward it. I want to show you something, he said, opening the passenger door for her. Clara hesitated, glancing back towards the bank in the distance. Her instincts told her to be cautious, but her curiosity got the better of her. She climbed into the car, her heart pounding as Musk slid into the driver's seat. The ride was silent at first, the city's glittering lights streaking past the windows. Musk seemed focused, his hands steady on the wheel. Finally, he broke the silence. I've been in disguise for weeks, testing banks' businesses in other institutions, he revealed. I wanted to see how they treated people who didn't fit the mold of wealth or success. Clara's eyes widened. That's ambitious, she said, struggling to process the scope of his experiment. It's necessary, Musk replied. Too often these places focus on profit and appearances rather than people, but every once in a while I meet someone like you, someone who sees beyond the surface. His words left Clara speechless. Before she could respond, the car pulled into an underground garage, and Musk parked and led her out. The elevator doors slid shut, and Clara's nerves heightened. When they opened, she was greeted by a stunning, state-of-the-art office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while sleek desks and monitors lined the room. Clara stepped out, her eyes darting around the space. Where are we? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This is one of my workspaces, Musk replied casually. A place where I use this space to plan ideas, build projects, and, most importantly, gather people I trust. Clara turned to face him, her confusion giving way to awe. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Musk's expression softened. I think you're one of those people, he said simply. You didn't know who I was, yet you chose to do the right thing. That's rare, Clara, and I don't believe in letting rare qualities go to waste. Clara felt her cheeks flush. I don't understand, she said. What do you want from me? Clara replied. I want to offer you a job. It's a matter of fact, Musk said. It's a lot more meaningful than what you're doing now. I'm building a team of people who value integrity, innovation, and humanity. People like you. The weight of his words settled over her. Clara's mind raced with questions, but one thought stood out above the rest. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. What kind of job are we talking about? She asked cautiously. It's a great opportunity, Musk replied. I'm looking for people who are willing to take risks, learn, grow, and contribute to something bigger than themselves. You'll help change how institutions operate. You'll learn, grow, and contribute to something bigger than yourself. It won't be easy, though. It requires courage, hard work, and a willingness to take risks. Clara hesitated, taking in the magnitude of the offer. She thought of her life at the bank, how stifling and morally conflicted it often felt. This was her chance to break free and do something meaningful. Finally, she met his gaze and said, I'm in. Musk's smile widened. He widened his eyes and extended his hand, welcoming her to the team. As Clara shook his hand, she felt a surge of excitement and apprehension. She had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning after her life-changing conversation with Musk, she woke up with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The weight of her decision lingered, but she was filled with a new sense of purpose as she prepared for her day at the bank. She couldn't help but wonder what Musk's next steps would be and how she fit into them at the bank. Things were business as usual. The same parade of wealthy clients flowed through the gleaming doors, greeted with plastic smiles and polished professionalism. However, Clara found it difficult to concentrate. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Musk and the enigmatic opportunity he had offered. She was eager to learn more. Clara had no idea when or how she would hear from Musk again. By mid-afternoon, she was almost convinced that Musk's visit had been a dream. But as if on cue, the bank's glass doors swung open and Musk walked in. This time, his appearance was slightly more polished and understated, blending into the affluent surroundings. All eyes turned toward him, and a hushed murmur rippled through the lobby. Clara felt her heart leapt as he made his way towards her desk. Good afternoon, Clara, Musk said with a warm smile as he took a seat across from her. Clara quickly processed the deposit, her fingers trembling slightly as she entered the amount into the system. $10,000, she whispered, her eyes widening. Musk nodded, his expression calm. Consider it a gesture of trust, he said. Clara handed him the receipt, her mind racing. What was he doing? The sudden deposit was sure to attract attention, and she wasn't sure how to explain it. As if on cue, Mr. Reynolds emerged from his office. His sharp eyes scanned the room, landing on Musk. Musk's expression changed to one of confusion and suspicion. He walked over to Clara's desk and asked, Is everything okay here? No problem at all, Clara replied, looking between Musk and Reynolds. Just conducting some business, Musk said smoothly. Reynolds raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. You're a new client, he said, extending his hand. A client who appreciates the excellent service your trainee has provided. Reynolds hesitated, then shook Musk's hand. Hand reluctantly. We're glad to have you, he said, sounding less than genuine. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. Musk smiled. Thank you, but Clara has been more than helpful. She was supposed to go to Reynolds's office, and she braced herself for the inevitable questions. Her pulse quickened as she stepped inside. Reynolds was seated behind his desk, and he didn't look like he was in a good mood. He told her to close the door. She did, and then he asked her who that man was. He sounded really angry, and he was looking at her like she was the worst person in the world. She told him that he was a new client who had come in last week and wanted to open an account. She helped him, and now he was asking her why. I was told about this, and Clara hesitated. It was a small account at first. She explained that she didn't think it needed to be escalated. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, studying her. I don't like surprises, he said. If this client turns out to be problematic, it will reflect poorly on you. Clara met his gaze, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. I don't think he's problematic, she said. In fact, I think he might be one of our most important clients. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. He raised an eyebrow, looking unconvinced. We'll see, he said dismissively. I hope you're right. That evening, Clara received a message on her phone from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it, her heart pounding as she read the brief text. You handled that well. Be ready. Things are about to get interesting. Clara stared at the message, a mixture of excitement and apprehension washing over her. Musk's cryptic words hinted at a larger plan. She was now For the first time in her life, Clara felt like she was on the brink of something big. Whatever Musk had planned, she was ready to face it. The next day started like any other at the bank. Clara arrived early, her mind still buzzing from Musk's cryptic text. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen as she organized her workspace. Her colleagues chatted idly, unaware of the undercurrent of anticipation running through her. By mid-morning, the calm at the bank was disrupted by the arrival of a sleek Tesla Model X. Its polished exterior caught the sunlight, and heads turned as the car door opened and Musk stepped out. This time, he was dressed in a sharp suit that exuded authority. Inside, the staff exchanged confused glances as Musk entered the lobby. His presence commanded immediate attention. Gone was the man in ragged clothes. In his place stood a figure of unmistakable power and confidence. Clara's heart was racing as she realized the moment of truth had arrived. Musk approached the reception desk where Marilyn froze. Her professional demeanor faltered. "Good morning," he said smoothly. His voice carried an edge of amusement. "I'd like to speak with the manager." Moments later, Musk was ushered into Mr. Reynolds' office. Clara watched from her desk. Her hands were trembling slightly. She couldn't hear their conversation, but the tension was palpable. Reynolds' expression shifted from polite curiosity to stunned. Reynolds was taken aback when Musk revealed his identity. "You're Elon Musk," he stammered, his face pale. "I've spent the past few weeks visiting institutions like yours to see how they treat people who don't fit the typical mold of wealth and success." Musk replied calmly but firmly. "What I saw here wasn't impressive," he continued. "Your staff's behavior was the same, except for one thing. The person was being a bit condescending and dismissive. That's not the kind of culture a financial institution should cultivate." Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mr. Musk, I assure you this is an isolated incident. Our bank values all of its clients. The lack of integrity and compassion in your organization was highlighted when Musk made his next statement. I'm acquiring this bank." His tone left no room for argument. Reynolds was taken aback. "Excuse me, you heard me," Musk said. "I've already initiated the paperwork. This institution will soon be under my control. The first order of business will be a complete overhaul of its culture and policies." Reynolds struggled to compose himself. "I'm sure we can work together to address any concerns you have." Musk smiled faintly. Clara blinked, stunned. "Mr. Musk," she began, but he interrupted. "Call me Elon," he said with a smile. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on her desk. "I'd like you to join my team full-time, effective immediately." The room fell silent. The weight of his words hanging in the air, Clara stared at the card, her heart pounding. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Musk replied. Clara looked around the room at her colleagues' faces, which were a mixture of shock, envy, and disbelief. She thought of all the times she had doubted herself, the moments when she felt like her values didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege. And yet here she was, being recognized for the very qualities she had been told to suppress. "Dumba," she met Musk's gaze and nodded. "Yes," she said firmly. Musk extended his hand, and as Clara shook it, she felt a newfound confidence she hadn't experienced before. "This is just the beginning," Musk said quietly as he left the bank. The staff erupted into murmurs, their eyes darting toward Clara as if seeing her for the first time. But she didn't care. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. For the first time, she felt ready to embrace it. Clara's last day at the bank came and went in a whirlwind. The morning after her dramatic departure, she arrived at the address Musk had given her was a shiny new building in the middle of downtown Los Angeles. The building looked like it was all about new ideas, and its sleek design was a reflection of Musk's relentless pursuit of progress. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by a receptionist who showed her into a private elevator. The ride-up was both exciting and nerve-wracking. When the doors opened, Clara found herself in a spacious, futuristic office. The walls of glass offered breathtaking views of the city, while the space was buzzing with quiet efficiency. Musk appeared moments later, dressed casually but exuding his usual confidence. "Welcome to your new office, Clara." Musk got straight down to business, immersing Clara in her new role. Over the next few hours, he introduced her to his core team, a diverse group of individuals who shared his vision for transforming institutions. Each member brought a unique skill set to the table, from technology and finance to psychology and design. During a private meeting, Musk explained that Clara was there because she brought something they'd been missing: compassion, integrity, and the courage to challenge the status quo. He added that those qualities are rare in this industry. We need them if we're going to succeed. Clara nodded, still trying to process the rapid pace of her new reality. What exactly is my role here? Musk leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. You're going to help us redesign how financial institutions operate. He said, we want to create systems that prioritize people over profits and treat everyone with dignity regardless of their net worth. Clara felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. That sounds ambitious, she admitted. It is, Musk said with a grin. He grinned. I didn't bring you here to do easy work. The days that followed were some of the most intense of Clara's life. She threw herself into projects aimed at overhauling traditional banking systems. She learned everything from cutting-edge financial technology to the psychological impact of financial exclusion. Musk's leadership style was inspiring and demanding. He pushed Clara to think creatively, question assumptions, and embrace failure as a stepping stone to success. The learning curve was steep, but Clara found herself one evening, while they were going over a presentation on inclusive banking models. Clara brought up a concern that had been on her mind. How do we convince institutions to adopt these changes? She asked. They're so set in their ways. Musk leaned forward, his expression serious. We show them it works, he said. If we can create a prototype of a bank that operates on these principles and succeeds, it'll force the rest of the industry to take notice. Clara nodded, the weight of the challenge settling on her shoulders, but for the first time she felt like she was part of something truly meaningful. One afternoon, Clara joined Musk on a visit to a struggling community bank in an underserved neighborhood. The contrast to her previous workplace was stark. The staff were overworked, the technology outdated, and the customers desperate for help. Musk introduced Clara to the bank's manager, a weary but kind woman named Mrs. Garcia. We're here to help, he said, his tone reassuring. Clara will be leading this project, he added. Clara blinked, taken aback. Aback, I will, Musk said. You understand better than anyone what needs to change. We're not here to replace your systems, she said. We're here to enhance them and create opportunities where none currently exist. Her sincerity won them over, and the project moved forward. Musk, who had been monitoring her progress, praised her diplomacy. You're not just building banks. Clara, you're building bridges as the international branches of Equity First Bank began to flourish. You've become the center of a growing movement. Activists, economists, and policymakers are rallying around your vision, advocating for systemic changes in global finance at an international summit on financial inclusion. You delivered a keynote address that captivated the audience. You shared stories of the people you've met, like Aisha in Kenya and others who have used their newfound access to banking to transform their lives. We have the tools to make finance a force for good, she said. It starts with a choice: to put people before profits and build systems that include everyone, not exclude anyone. Her speech got a standing ovation, and afterwards, several world leaders came up to her with offers of support, despite her growing influence. Clara stayed humble, often thinking about how far she'd come. One evening, as she walked through the busy streets of Nairobi, she thought about her days as a trainee at the bank, when she'd felt powerless to challenge the system. Musk's experiment, the man in ragged clothes that had changed everything. His willingness to test the system had revealed her own capacity for courage and compassion. Now she was using those qualities to transform the lives of people around the world. Later that night, Clara called Musk to share her thoughts. You saw something in me I didn't even see in myself, she said. I didn't make you who you are, Musk replied. I just gave you the opportunity to show it. The rest was all you. Clara's work kept on growing. She started mentoring the next generation of leaders at Equity First Bank. She believed it was really important to pass on the lessons she had learned and to help others carry on the mission. During a training session with new recruits, Clara shared a piece of advice that had guided her from the beginning. It was, never underestimate the power of a single act of kindness. It might seem small, but it can change everything for you and for the world. Her words really resonated with her team, inspiring them to embrace the values that had made Equity First Bank a success by the end of the year were. Equity First Bank had branches and programs in over 20 countries, each tailored to the unique needs of its communities. The movement Clara and Musk had started was no longer just an idea, it was a global force for change. One evening as Clara stood on the balcony of a hotel in India, overlooking a vibrant city alive with possibility, She felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been challenging, but every step had been worth it. Musk joined. His expression thoughtful, he said, "You've done something remarkable." "So have you," Clara replied with a smile. He shook his head. "This was always about you. I took the risks, made the sacrifices, and turned a vision into reality." As they stood together, looking out at a world that was slowly but surely changing for the better, Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The mission wasn't complete, but she knew they were building something that would outlast them both. A legacy of hope, inclusion, and humanity. Years passed, and Equity First Bank became a key player in global financial inclusion. The institution's mission expanded from transforming banking practices to empowering entire communities. Its branches were no longer just places to deposit money. They were hubs of opportunity where people could access education resources and tools to build better futures. Clara's role also evolved. While she remained deeply involved in the organization, she began focusing on mentorship and advocacy. Her work inspired a new wave of leaders, each dedicated to carrying forward the principles that had made Equity First Bank a one evening. Clara was standing on the stage of a packed auditorium at a global conference on financial innovation. Industry leaders, activists, and policymakers from every corner of the world had gathered to celebrate the impact of Equity First Bank. Musk was seated in the front row, smiling as Clara stepped up to the podium. Clara took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces. "When this journey began," she said, her voice steady, "I was just a trainee in a bank, unsure of my place in the world. I never imagined that one day I'd be here. A small act of kindness set me on a path to change my life and the lives of so many others." She paused, letting her words sink in. "What we've built isn't just a bank, it's a movement. It's proof that finance can be a force for good. We can create systems that uplift, not exclude." Clara's voice grew stronger as she continued, "But this movement isn't about one person or one organization. It's about all of us and the choices we make, the values we uphold, and the future we want to create together. We've shown that change is possible, and together we'll keep pushing for a world where opportunity is truly for everyone." The audience gave a big round of applause and a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Musk stood as well, clapping with genuine pride. Later that evening, Claire and Musk shared a quiet moment backstage. The applause had faded, but the energy of the event still lingered. "You've created something extraordinary," Musk said. Clara smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." Musk shook his head. "I gave you an opportunity, but you turned it into something far greater than I ever imagined. That's your legacy." Clara looked thoughtful. "It's not just mine. It belongs to everyone who believed in the vision and worked to make it real." She focused on preparing her successors and worked closely with a new generation of leaders, making sure they understood UND's core values. One of her ments, a young woman named Amara, reminded Clara of herself in her early days. Amara was idealistic, determined, and full of potential. During their last mentoring session, Clara gave Amara the same advice Musk had given her years ago. "Don't be afraid to challenge the system. The hardest battles are often the most important ones. And remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about making progress." Amara nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I won't let you down," she said. Clara smiled. "You won't," she replied. "I believe in you." On a quiet evening, Clara returned to the park bench where her journey had begun. She thought about the memory of Musk in his ragged clothes, sitting at the bank counter with $20. It felt both distant and vivid. She thought about how much had changed since that day. How a single decision had set her on a path she never could have imagined. Musk joined her a few minutes later carrying 2 cups of coffee. He said, "I thought I'd find you here," handing her a cup. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world go by. Finally, Clara spoke. "Do you think we've done enough?" Musk took a sip of his coffee. His gaze thoughtful, he said, "No, we've done something, and that's inspired lots of others to do more. That's how change works. It's never about one person or one action. It's about the ripple effects." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of peace. She knew the work would never truly be finished, but she also knew they'd made a difference. As Clara and Musk walked away from the bench, the sun set behind them, casting the city in a warm golden light. In a warm golden light, their journey had been filled with challenges, triumphs, and lessons that neither of them could have anticipated. But the true legacy of their work wasn't in the buildings they had constructed or the systems they had changed. It was in the lives they had touched, the opportunities they had created, and the hope they had inspired. Clara knew that the future was bright, not because the work was done, but because it had only just begun. Over the next few weeks, Clara worked hard to make Musk's vision a reality at the community bank. She introduced new processes, digital tools to make transactions easier, and training programs to help the staff. But her biggest contribution was creating a culture of respect and empathy. By the time the project was done, the community bank had become a beacon of hope, attracting praise from Clara, who had once been a nervous trainee at a rigid institution, had grown into a confident leader who understood the power of compassion in finance. Musk watched her progress with quiet pride. He told her that he knew this wouldn't be easy, but she persisted. When they reviewed the project's success, Clara smiled. She admitted that it wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Musk nodded and said, "This is just the beginning." That night, Clara couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. Just look at how far she's come. The guy in ragged clothes who walked into her bank a few weeks ago changed her life in ways she never imagined. Now she's determined to pay it forward. The journey's far from over, but Clara knows she's exactly where she's meant to be, standing on the front lines of a revolution that'll change the world. Clara's success with the community bank got her noticed in Musk's organization and beyond. News of the transformation spread quickly with articles highlighting the new systems and ways of working she had put in place. But Clara stayed focused on the bigger picture. She knew Musk was right. This project was just the start. "We're not just changing one bank," he reminded her during a strategy meeting. "We're creating a model, a blueprint for how financial institutions can truly serve everyone." Their next step was ambitious, partnering with multiple small banks across the country to replicate the success of the first transformation. Clara was put in charge. As the project grew, so did the resistance. Not everyone was happy about the changes. Big banks and financial institutions were threatened by the shift in public perception and started pushing back. Representatives from these institutions dismissed Musk's initiative as idealistic and unsustainable. Clara found herself in meetings where her ideas were met with skepticism and outright hostility. One particularly heated discussion with a prominent banking executive left her feeling disheartened. "This isn't how the industry works." The man laughed and said, "You can't change the rules now." That evening, Clara told Musk that the other people in the industry didn't want to change. They were too comfortable with the way things were. Musk leaned back in his chair and said, "Of course they don't." He said that people resist change when it threatens their power. That's why they needed to prove them wrong again. His words made Clara feel more determined. She realized that the resistance wasn't a sign of failure. It was a sign of failure. It proved that they were making an impact. As Clara and her team moved forward, they began incorporating technology to make banking more accessible. Musk introduced her to developers and engineers who specialized in artificial intelligence and blockchain. He explained how these tools could revolutionize financial services. One evening, as Clara worked late in the office, Musk stopped by her desk. He asked her how she felt about the project. She looked up from her work and said, "It's exciting, but it's also overwhelming." She admitted there's so much to learn and the stakes feel so high. "That's how you know it's worth doing," said Musk. "The most important work always feels impossible at first." Clara nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She dove deeper into the technical aspects of the initiative, learning about innovations that could empower underserved communities. These included mobile banking apps for rural areas and financial literacy programs integrated into digital platforms. Amid the whirlwind of work, Clara began reflecting on her own journey. She thought back to her she'd spent days as a trainee at the bank, feeling powerless to challenge the status quo. Meeting Musk had been a turning point, but she realized that the qualities he valued in her, compassion, integrity, and courage, had been there all along. One evening, she sat down to write a personal statement for a presentation. As she wrote, she found herself pouring out thoughts she'd never fully articulated. Finance isn't just about numbers, it's about people. Every decision we make has the power to lift someone. I've seen how institutions can fail the people they're meant to serve. But I've also seen how a single act of kindness can change everything. That's why I do this work. Everyone deserves a chance, no matter where they start. The statement really resonated with her. She decided to include it in her upcoming speech at a financial industry conference. The day of the conference arrived. Clara stood backstage, her heart pounding as she prepared. To speak to a room full of industry leaders, Musk had encouraged her to share her story, saying it was exactly what the audience needed to hear. When her name was announced, Clara stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She took a deep breath, her nerves steadying as she began to speak. She shared her journey from her days as a trainee, helping a man in ragged clothes, to leading transformative projects that were reshaping the industry. She also spoke about the importance of empathy in finance, and the need to create systems that served everyone, not just the privileged few. The room was silent as she finished, and then one by one, the audience began to applaud. After the conference, Clara was approached by executives, entrepreneurs, and advocates who wanted to collaborate on her initiatives. Things were starting to look up, and Clara's vision was gaining momentum that night. Musk congratulated her on her success, saying, "You've done something incredible." Clara smiled and said, "I couldn't have done it without you." "Without you," she said. Musk shook his head. "You could have," he said. "You just needed someone to see it in you first." As Clara reflected on his words, she realized how far she had come, not just as a professional, but as a person. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As Clara's projects gained national attention, the demands on her time and energy intensified, leading multiple initiatives across various community banks. It required not only innovative thinking, but also exceptional leadership. Clara also had to lead the team, which meant juggling tasks, coordinating teams, presenting to stakeholders, and making sure that every detail was in line with the vision that Musk had given her. While the work was rewarding, it was also relentless. She quickly learned that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about inspiring others to believe in those decisions. Her team was a mix of seasoned professionals and fresh recruits who looked to her for guidance. Some were skeptical of the changes she proposed, but others were eager to contribute, but unsure how to proceed. One day, during a particularly tense meeting about integrating new technologies into an aging bank system, Clara faced open resistance from a senior team member, Alan. He said, "We've been running these systems for decades. Why overhaul something that already works?" Clara took a deep breath, resisting the urge to react defensively. She said, "Alan, I understand your concerns. Just because something works doesn't mean it can't be improved. These changes aren't about replacing the old. They are about building something better. For the people who rely on us," her measured response diffused the tension. By the end of the meeting, even Alan seemed more willing to listen, despite her professional success. Clara struggled to balance her work with her personal life. Late nights in the office and constant travel left little time for friends or family. Her roommate Kelly noticed the change. "You're doing amazing things," Clara Kelly said one evening as they caught up over coffee. "Don't forget to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup." Clara nodded, appreciating the sentiment, but she wasn't sure how to apply it. She'd always been driven by a sense of purpose, and stepping away from her work even briefly felt impossible. Her turning point came during a conversation with Musk after a long day of meetings. He invited her to his office for a one-on-one discussion. "You've been doing phenomenal work," he said, pouring them both a cup of tea. "I can see the toll it's taking," Clara said, hesitating. There's so much to do. I don't want to let anyone down." Musk smiled knowingly. "You're not letting anyone down by taking a moment to breathe. Leadership isn't just about action. It's about sustainability. If you burn out, you can't help anyone." His words stayed with her. Clara began setting boundaries, delegating tasks more effectively, and carving out time for herself. She realized that by taking care of her own well-being, she could show up even stronger for her. As the year went on, Musk revealed an ambitious new plan, opening a model bank that would put all the principles Clara and her team had been working towards into practice. The bank, called Equity First Bank, would be a prototype for inclusive and innovative banking practices. Clara was in charge of the project, which made her feel excited and nervous at the same time. The stakes were higher than ever, and there was a lot of pressure to succeed. When she met Musk, she told him her concerns. "What if we fail?" she asked. Her anxiety. Musk leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Failure is always a possibility," he said, "but so is success. The question isn't whether we'll encounter obstacles, it's how we'll overcome them. And I believe in your ability to do just that." With his encouragement, Clara threw herself into the project. She assembled a diverse team of experts and worked tirelessly to bring the vision to life, from the architecture of the building to the technology used in daily operations. Every detail was designed to when Equity First Bank finally opened its doors, it reflected the values of accessibility, transparency, and human connection. Customers from all walks of life flocked to the institution, drawn by its commitment to treating every individual with dignity and respect. The atmosphere inside the bank was unlike any other, welcoming, efficient, and inclusive. On opening day, Clara stood in the lobby watching as customers interacted with the staff and explored the new space. It was a surreal moment, the culmination of months of hard work and unwavering belief in a better way forward. Way forward, Musk joined her, looking really proud. "What do you think?" he asked Clara. She smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "It's everything we dreamed of," she said. He nodded, and it's only the beginning. The success of Equity First banks had a big impact on the financial industry. Other institutions started taking notice, and even reached out to Clara and her team for advice on making similar changes. What had once seemed impossible was now a reality, proving that ethical banking wasn't just an ideal. Clara's journey had come full circle. She'd gone from feeling powerless as a trainee to challenging the system. She'd become a leader who was transforming it. She knew there was still much work to be done, but she felt confident in her ability to rise to the challenge. As she left the bank that evening, the city lights shimmering around her, she couldn't help but smile. The man in ragged clothes who had walked into her life months ago had set her on a path she never could have imagined. She was determined to use her platform to make a difference, not just for herself, but for everyone. The path she never could have imagined. Now she was determined to use her platform to make a difference, not just for herself, but for everyone. Equity First Bank's success rippled through the financial world like a seismic wave. Articles lauded it as a groundbreaking achievement, and interviews with Clara became a regular feature in industry journals. While the claim was gratifying, Clara knew this was only the beginning. The challenge now was to scale the model to reach more communities without losing its core values. Musk called a meeting. Clara and the leadership team met to discuss their next steps. They'd proven the concept, and now it was time to expand. They wouldn't compromise on the principles that made this work. Clara understood the gravity of the task. The expansion wouldn't just be about opening new branches. It would involve training teams, adapting to regional needs, and ensuring every customer felt the same respect and care that had become Equity First Bank's hallmark. Clara threw herself into the expansion plans. By putting together a team of regional leaders, she wanted to find people with different backgrounds who understood the challenges their communities faced. She also wanted to find someone with a practical approach. She found Marcus, who had spent years as a community organizer, advocating for underserved neighborhoods. He impressed her with his passion and pragmatic approach. He said in their interview that you don't just need systems, you need trust. If people don't believe you're there for them, nothing else matters. Clara knew he was right and brought Marcus on board. With others who shared his insight and dedication, they began laying the groundwork for Equity First Bank's next phase. As you might expect, the expansion faced resistance. Established banks continued to undermine Clara's efforts, launching aggressive campaigns to discredit her model. One prominent financial analyst appeared on television calling Equity First Bank a naive experiment doomed to fail. Clara felt a pang of frustration, but quickly reminded herself of Musk's philosophy. Resistance was a sign of progress. They wouldn't fight us if they didn't feel threatened. Musk one evening, after reading a particularly scathing article, he told her, "It means we're doing something right." Still, the pressure was immense. Clara often found herself working late into the night, going over reports and strategizing ways to address the challenges ahead. Despite the exhaustion, she felt a sense of purpose that carried her through. The breakthrough came when Clara's team piloted a new initiative, a mobile banking unit designed to serve remote and rural communities. The sleek, solar-powered vans were equipped with cutting-edge technology, allowing customers can open accounts, apply for loans, and access financial education resources right there and then. The response was incredible. In one small town, an elderly farmer was so moved he cried. He said, "No one's ever brought a bank to us before. You're giving us a chance to catch up with the rest of the world." Stories like these reaffirmed Clara's commitment to the mission. The mobile units quickly became a symbol of Equity First Bank's dedication to accessibility and innovation. The bank expanded and Clara's influence grew. She was invited to speak at international conferences, where she shared her vision for a financial industry rooted in compassion and equity. Her talks were met with standing ovations, and other organizations began adopting elements of her approach. But Clara remained humble, often deflecting praise toward her team. She said during one interview, "It's not about me. It's about creating a system that works for everyone." Her humility only ended. Musk was her mentor and watched her rise with quiet pride. He told her she'd become a leader, which was music to her ears. He said the best leaders are the kind people want to follow, not because they have to, but because they believe in you. The expansion wasn't without its setbacks. In one region, a new branch faced unexpected delays due to local bureaucracy. Clara flew out personally to address the issue, spending days navigating red tape and building relationships with skeptical officials. "It's frustrating," she told Marcus on a late-night phone call. "But we can't let obstacles stop us by the end of the week." By the end of the week, Clara had secured the necessary approvals, but the experience left her drained. She kept thinking about Musk's words about sustainability, reminding her to pace herself for the LA. Equity First Bank continued to grow, and Clara began envisioning even larger possibilities. She dreamed of creating financial literacy programs for schools, partnerships with tech companies to develop new tools, and global initiatives to bring banking to underserved populations worldwide. Musk encouraged her to think big and serve populations worldwide. He said the world needs leaders who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo. He told her, "You've already proven you can do that. Now it's time to take it further." Clara took his words to heart and dove deeper into her work with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she felt ready to face whatever challenges came her way. She stood in the lobby of a newly opened branch watching customers interact with staff who treated them with genuine respect. They treated her with genuine respect. Clara felt a great sense of achievement. The revolution Musk had envisioned was no longer just a distant dream. It was a reality she had helped create. And this was only the beginning. With Equity First Bank's success spreading across the nation, Clara began to look beyond domestic borders. Inspired by Musk's encouragement to think big, she envisioned a global expansion that would bring accessible, equitable banking to underserved communities worldwide. The idea was daunting, but Clara knew the principles they'd established. "We're not just creating banks," Clara said during a meeting with her team. "We're creating hope, and hope isn't limited by borders." Musk nodded in agreement. "The challenge will be adapting our model to different cultures, economies, and regulations," he said. "But that's what makes this worth doing. If we succeed, we can change the global financial system forever." Clara and her team began by identifying regions with the most significant need for financial inclusion. Rural areas in sub-Saharan Africa and urban slums in Southeast Asia and underserved indigenous communities in South America were also key focus points. It was a huge task, but Clara was determined to succeed, just like she had been with her earlier projects. Her first international project took her to Kenya, where a lack of traditional banking infrastructure had left millions relying on informal financial systems. She partnered with local leaders and fintech innovators to launch a pilot program that combined mobile banking with in-person support centers. One afternoon while visiting a remote village, Clara met a woman named Aisha who ran a small, but Aisha had a thriving agricultural business. She'd never had access to formal banking, but she'd managed to grow her enterprise through sheer determination. After opening her first account, she told Clara she could now plan for her children's future. Hearing stories like Aisha's reaffirmed Clara's belief in the power of accessible banking. The pilot program's success paved the way for similar initiatives across other regions. While the global expansion was promising, it wasn't without its hurdles in some areas locally. Governments were reluctant, worried about foreign influence or disruption of existing systems. Clara quickly showed the importance of building trust and working with regional stakeholders during a tense negotiation with officials in Southeast Asia. She explained that the program was about empowerment, not competition.